Welcome, listeners, to another edition of Affording Your Life. And this is Keith Ellison, your people's lawyer. And, Affording Your Life is a show about the economics of real life, not just the Dow Jones Industrial Average, but stuff that matters to you. And we're focusing today on veterans issues. This edition today, will be focused on how everybody, elected officials, community, business leaders, everyday folks, are dealing with prosperity challenges for our veterans community. Let me just say, folks, I'm so proud that my son is a veteran, my dad's a veteran. I'm so proud of our veterans, people who risk their lives for the sake of the rest of us, to have a democratic society, to have a society where we can live free. It is ensured by our veterans. And I want to acknowledge, the uncertainty and the worry probably a lot of families have right now if their loved ones are stationed somewhere around Iran. This has got to be terrifying for loved ones. I know that I was always nervous when my son was active duty about conflict breaking out. So we just want to send our love and our respect to all of those families. But let me just introduce our folks today. Let me start with my good friend, John Baker. John, tell the folks a little bit about you and the work you do and why you're so fundamentally committed to veterans' best interests.
My grandfather was a soldier who fought in World War One, in the trenches in World War One, and he. You remember when we were younger, World War One soldiers dying of the gas. Remember that? And so my grandfather died at the age of 50 at the Minneapolis VA from mustard gas poisoning from World War One. And my father was very young. My father was in the Marine Corps. He joined the Marine Corps and served in Korea, fought in Korea, and then back in 1980 when you and I were graduating high school, that it was right after Vietnam, and there was not a lot of people joining the military. My kicker for me is, I graduated high school and I just kind of bounced around, and I ended up in front of a judge. Before he sentenced me to a DWI, he asked me if I had anything else to say. I said, yes, sir. I joined the Marine Corps. And he looked at me and said, good, I don't want to see you around here for a long time. So what inspired me was a family of service. And then I kind of had no choice when I came to that position. So I joined the Marine Corps, and then spent 22 years in the Marine Corps. I served all over the world. I was in Beirut, Lebanon in 1983, when 242 Marines were killed. And it's kind of what's going on now. There's obviously a direct connection with what we're doing in Iran to really the start of modern day terrorism.
Michael McLaughlin, Veteran Service Officer from Blue Earth County. Michael, why don't you just tell the folks a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm the County Veteran Service Officer in Blue Earth County down in Mankato, Minnesota. People that know where that is, Minnesota State. We have a high university town population, so young veteran population in the area. Been a County Veteran Service Officer and accredited for about a decade now. Back in 2016 is when I took this position. Prior to that, I worked for Minnesota Assistance Council for Veterans, the Southern Region outreach worker, working with homeless veterans and low-income veterans across the state. So as a County Veteran Service Officer, we're here with that Minnesota model to be an in-the-community point source for veterans or dependents to help navigate the VA system, help gain access to their benefits, but then also help with enrollment in healthcare and patient advocacy on that side. The whole list of other things too. So, and the best part is we're a free service for those that served, because I think every service member and their family that is entitled to benefits through that service, the country owes them, that baseline service to help gain access to it. So we're pleased to help carry out part of President Lincoln's directive that's inscribed on the walls of the VA for him who shall borne the battle, his widow and his orphan. That's a great mission.
It sure is. And I'm so honored we have Josh Marvin. Josh, you are an investigator at the Attorney General's office, and you're right there on the ground helping serve our vets. Tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am an investigator in our Consumer Protection Division, which means I look into a pretty wide variety of scams and anti-consumer practices. And one of the areas that I've been working on for close to a year now, 11 months, as of this recording, is veteran targeted financial scams. So I monitor our office's veteran complaint form. So if you're a veteran in the state of Minnesota and you've been targeted by a scam that's targeting you because you're a veteran, that's targeting you to take your benefits, we encourage you to use that veteran complaint form that our office is set up. I look at those complaints and I've investigated those scams, or I've worked with our consumer action division to help resolve those issues as well. It's part of my job that I take very seriously, right? Serving our veterans and like Michael said, like honoring that commitment that we're supposed to have as a country and as a society is a really, really important part of this job and part of what we do in consumer protection.
So, Michael and Josh, all of you guys have been serving our veterans. I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about what inspired you? Michael, for example, why don't we start with you? What inspires you? Because you were a veteran yourself.
Yeah, correct. So I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 2003. I was a military age male when 9/11 happened. I was a senior in high school, and a lot of my fellow classmates ended up going off and enlisting and serving, or got commissioned as officers and ended up serving. And then when the war in Iraq started in the spring of 2003, really kind of hit home for me. I was in college, pursuing higher education at that point, but then a lot of my friends that I grew up with were then going off to serve our nation in that war. And so I just felt kind of compelled with family history and legacy. I know, Keith, you said your father is a veteran too as well, having that in my home. Never pressure to serve, but I was always proud of my family's service on that side of it. And then when I had friends that were going off, I really felt compelled. So finished the semester, enlisted in the Marine Corps, and then went off and started my journey, deployed twice in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, 1st Battalion, 1st Marines. Last one is actually coming up on 20 years right now. 2006 was the last deployment to Iraq. And came home, transitioned out of the military at the end of 2007, and came back home and used my GI Bill and went to Minnesota State and got my degree, and worked in state for a little while, worked with private sector for a little while, but I always was volunteering for veteran-related causes and issues. Specifically, worked with then Congressman Walz on some of the post 9/11 GI Bill stuff, which I think you were in Congress at that time.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Got to experience a little bit on the national advocacy on that side of it then. And when my wife and I were in a position with our family where I could look at maybe getting out of the private sector and maybe looking at something that I wanted to do versus something I was okay with doing, the veteran advocacy piece kept knocking at my door. And so that's when I transitioned from private sector to Minnesota Assistance Council for Veterans originally, working on that side of it, having that broad impact on homeless and low-income veterans. And then when I realized what county veteran service officers do, or accredited veteran service officers do, how they are essentially pro bono advocacy and legal counsel for benefits claims, healthcare enrollment, educational enrollment, navigating those waters. I really kind of set my eyes on trying to make an impact there, and was fortunate enough in 2016 to get the position I'm at. So I had that legacy of service before, and wanting to serve the men and women that I served with post-service, that family tradition of service, and it just kind of seemed to carry on. I don't know if I caught the flu or the bug or whatever you want to call it. But.
Yeah, well, we're glad you did, man. And Josh, let me just ask you. I know you are not a veteran. Neither am I, but you still demonstrated an extraordinary amount of dedication to our veterans. What's driving you forward?
Well, first, thank you, Keith. I think when I first got assigned to this issue and really started looking into the breadth of scams and consumer protection problems and just sort of shortcomings facing our veterans, what becomes really apparent is that this is a area with a gap, right? There is a gap between what our government says veterans deserve and what we have promised, right? This subset of people who have sacrificed a lot for our country versus what we actually deliver. Like it is just a simple injustice in a lot of instances. And we can get into this later, but just the ways that veterans will leave the service and not have access to the resources that they're supposed to be guaranteed, the way that overall affects their families and their communities and their sense of safety and trust just navigating their day-to-day life. It's a big problem, and it's an area where I think the government, public service workers can step up and deliver for these folks who have given a lot for us.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. And Michael, turning back to you before we jump into the claim sharks issues and the benefit stuff. I wonder if you would help our listeners out because we live in a time of volunteer military, which means that whereas at one time in American history, military service was a broadly shared experience, today it's not necessarily a broadly shared experience. Apart from the politics, honestly, I'm not even asking you about what you think about Trump's decision in Iran. That's not even the question. The question I'm asking you is, imagine yourself, which you can imagine because you were deployed, being in Iraq, being in Bahrain, being in UAE, being in Doha. You're there, you're an American service member, and missiles are flying. And could you give our listeners a sense of what that could be like for them? Leaving the politics aside.
Yeah, I mean, trying to put myself in their scenarios, a little harder. I guess I had the benefit when I enlisted with the expectation of war because we had just invaded Iraq in 2003 and Afghanistan was still early in that process. So I would imagine for those service members that were stationed are stationed overseas when this conflict kicked off, maybe something similar to when the USS Cole was attacked over there. Didn't have that probably heightened state or threat. I don't know what briefings they were getting at that time, so maybe obviously they had some pre-warning. But what I think for a lot of them, especially our Minnesota units that deployed, we had the soldier, Sergeant First Class Armor from White Bear Lake that was killed in action from Minnesota. When their deployment left, I don't know if that was something that was in their purview or thought process of direct confrontation at that time. A lot more was support sustainability. So I don't know, never being on the front end of a war conflict. Like I said, I had the luxury of, if you want to call it that, enlisting in the middle of a war and expecting combat at that point. But I do know from conversations with my father, who had deployed or served in Vietnam, 1967 to 68, and was wounded. I do know from talking to him after I got older and came back home the anxiety and some of the concern that put on him with me being overseas. And I can only imagine for the loved ones back home right now what they're going through and their thought processes with those that are stationed abroad in the Middle East over there and are in harm's way now every day. And I only hope that any conflict that we can support those families and those soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marine as much as they deserve, and always keep them at the focal point.
Yeah, yeah. So we're calling it a current conflict now, and I guess that's what it is. I'm here in D.C. with a whole lot of other veterans, and one of them just said, kind of sat down and said, said, "Oh, geez, we're gonna go through this again." And so, for me, some people have said this is what the administration is doing is retribution for the 243 Marines that we lost in Beirut, but that was 43 years ago. And the people that are responsible for that are long gone. And retribution for that is long gone, and accountability for what happened to us then, that was just a different time. So, having served in the military, having a son in the military now, I I just shake my head. I would like to know if we have some defined end purposes for what we're doing. And I do not feel good about this current conflict of what we're doing, and sending our young men and women off to fight in this conflict. It breaks my heart.
So, Josh, you working as an investigator, and one of the things you do is to monitor our Veterans Complaint Forum and attend many of our community forums. Can you share some of the general sentiment without sacrificing anybody's privacy? What are you generally hearing from folks? Just give us a sense of how vets are feeling, and particularly when it comes to some of these financial challenges.
Yeah, I think that what I've heard from folks at some of these in-person forums that our office has been hosting around Minnesota, and what we're getting on the veteran complaint submission can sort of be split into two different buckets. I think when I talk to people in person, I hear a lot of concerns about disenfranchisement. One theme that pops up a lot is that people get out of the military and they're immediately hit over the head with all these for-profit operations, these things that are either scams or borderline scams that promise them to give them extra benefits for these very high fees, all of these predatory loan programs, and they're not necessarily told right out of the gate all of the things that they have access to for free because of their service that is just provided to them through their government. So I think the message I get when I actually talk to people face to face is, we need to do a better job marketing. The federal government needs to do a better job marketing, and it's just a matter of communicating to vets like, this exists to help you adjust. This exists to give you a leg up and to give you some benefits for the service you provided. On the veteran complaint line we get a fair amount of complaints about this business model called a claim shark, which I can get into now.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's dive into it. What is a claim shark?
Yeah, so a claim shark is a company that tells veterans that they can help them get either an accelerated or a larger disability or care and attendance benefit from the VA. This can be a pretty intimidating process to navigate. It can be a pretty cumbersome process. These companies say, hey, if you give us a portion of your benefits on the back end, or you pay us this big upfront fee for an assessment, we can get you your care faster. They say that they can maybe help you skip the line at the VA, or they promise you a benefit like guaranteed 100% disability that they just can't promise. They do things that no one can do. Like, no one can really skip the line at the VA. No one can guarantee you any percent disability. But if you're talking to people who are, scared by this process, who are rightfully, I think, intimidated by the amount of bureaucracy they have to navigate, and in many cases, like folks who really need the benefits, they have some success, right, separating veterans from their dollars. And then I think one of the worst parts is not disclosing that the service they are providing is a service that someone like Michael can provide for free as a veteran service officer. So it's all around, pretty predatory, something that our office is taking a look at pretty intensely, and something that I know they're debating legislation on right here in St. Paul, a couple blocks that way. And that seems to be a big theme for a lot of the complaints we get.
Michael, can you build on that? I mean, you are a veteran yourself, but you're a veteran service officer who serves veterans. So what should veterans know, and their families and the people who love them know, about this claim shark issue?
Yeah, I guess I would say that the first thing, if anybody's looking for assistance with veterans benefits or dependents of veterans benefits, and they're working with an individual, I would ask them what their accreditation number is. So like accredited reps on the county level, the state level, municipal, or like veteran service organizations like VFW, American Legion, DAV, even Wounded Warrior Project, Vietnam Vets of America, all their reps that are certified by VA as having the commiserate level of training and education to represent them before the federal government have Office of General Counsel accreditation number. Also, every VA accredited attorney or VA accredited claims agents, because those do exist and are lawful and certain means of representation, also have VA accrediting numbers that you can look up on the VA website on VA OGC accreditation search. So if you're dealing with somebody that's promising benefits assistance or promising a guarantee, usually the promise is the first smoke where there might be fire, and the second one is if you ask for what their accreditation number is and they can't give you a VA accreditation number. So that's the difference. Is one is a codified professional that has set standards of education, set ethical parameters, and the ones like VA accredited attorneys and claims agents that can charge a fee on the appeal level type claims. That's all codified in what they can charge you on that side. Most of these companies kind of skirt that definition where they, say they're claims preparers, where they're not wading into that representation piece or helping you complete the forms. I think, across the Attorney General offices in the state, the different states that are looking at this, and at the federal government, we've seen enough instances where these companies are, kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth on this, where they are completing the forms and having, people do the digital signatures for it and submitting directly to VA for them. There's been a lot of concerns on that side of it. So that's, just a little bit of a base understanding on some of the differences out there. Why this matters, I think, to veterans, to this nation, and to the country outside of the veteran population, like, I've discussed before, our country, when we have an all volunteer force, even, during the days when we had a draft, those servicemen and women raise their right hand, they swear an oath to protect the Constitution and de facto this whole country, not just their county, not just their city, not just their state. And so the benefits that they have that they're entitled to through that service to their country, there should be a baseline level of care and assistance for them, no matter what state in the union they live in, whether they live in Minnesota or Mississippi, whether they live in California or Connecticut. There should be a baseline level of service. And so a lot of these companies have come in and said it's free market, it's about choice, it's about providing that ability to pick and choose who you represent. Well, there's plenty of choice out there right now, but the argument of paying for assistance makes that assistance therefore better is kind of morally defunct when we have an obligation as a nation to those men and women that served to provide that baseline service and assistance for them. And the option never should be, well, if it's that confusing and it's that difficult and the VA is so bureaucratic that you need assistance, that we're going to allow you to essentially be de facto taxed and pay from that service from your country to get access to those benefits from service to your country. That's the bigger argument.
Well, Mike, could you keep the mic and just go on a little bit about what people can get, what kind of services they can get through the Veteran Service Office, and you could, go on talk about Blue Earth County, but really any county, just like what is available.
So the county Veteran Service Office is a model that's in about 32, 33 of the states in the union. A lot of states also have the State Department of Veteran Affairs that fill that role. And in some states like Massachusetts, they have municipal, the city level service offices. Big cities like New York City, they have, municipal service officers in New York City too as well. So essentially they're accredited reps that are signed off on their training by their national organizations and verified by VA that they're able to represent, again, almost like pro bono legal counsel. I'm not trying to claim to be a lawyer. I know we have some lawyers in the room here on that side of it, but essentially we're helping veterans navigate that case to gain access for benefits, whether that's through disability compensation benefits, whether it's for survivors benefits, for dependents of a loved one that died in service or died of a service-connected condition, healthcare enrollment and access, for home adaptability grants within VA, for educational assistance and grants too, and programs on that side of it, from the GI Bill to Voc Rehab or VRE, to the final benefit, memorial and burial affairs to the National Cemetery Administration. So we kind of cover a broad spectrum, and that's one of the dangers of privatizing just the disability piece of it, Keith, is usually the discussion with a veteran around service-related injury, service-connected injury, is just the tip of the spear on all those other things, for healthcare access, for housing, for education on that piece of it. And we've seen in reports from the VA and reports that have come out of Congress too, that veterans enrolled in VA healthcare and using VA healthcare have lower rates of suicide and have better outcomes and health outcomes that aren't enrolled in there. And so 9 times out of 10 in my office, a lot of times that discussion starts with disability. And then as advocates and as accredited reps that aren't focused on monetization of the disability benefit for my own personal gain and my office's gain, the discussion evolves into, how can we help you transition, to Josh's point? How can we help put services in place to help you be successful post-service? And that's a big piece that gets missed too out of this argument too as well.
Now let's say somebody who is one of our trained shepherds in this area, one of our CVSOs. Let's say they do something that you don't like. Can you complain?
Yes, you can file just like a lawyer. You can file a complaint with the Office of Professional Responsibility. You can file a complaint. So actually, with a CVSO, there's multiple levels of accountability, because all CVSOs work for their county commissioners, and so you can talk to that county commissioner. They also, the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs has regulatory control over CVSOs. And then you can file an official complaint with the Office of General Counsel with the federal VA.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And Josh, could you just go into a little bit about what the AG's office can do for our veterans? Just sort of elaborate a little bit.
First of all, we share resources on our website, on our social media, and as you know, we put out press releases as well when veterans should be aware of scams targeting them and letting them know about the resources that are available. We have that complaint form that I've mentioned, and if you're a veteran and you're targeted, you should absolutely take advantage of our veteran complaint form. We'll link all the resources in the notes for this show as well. So if you're listening and you or someone might be targeted for your benefits by a Claim Shark company, definitely share those as well. But yeah, really just take advantage of our veteran complaint form, and then just some of our more general scam stopper alerts that our offices put out, just to be aware. One thing, if you don't mind, my piggybacking on a point Michael made about the argument that some of these deceptive practices are just part of the free market, is that for the free market to really work, people need to have good information. People need to be coming at it from a fair playing field. And a lot of these companies are just deceptive. They don't disclose that they're not just competing with each other, they're competing with public services. And there are the same sort of methods for getting benefits that are publicly available. And sometimes they don't even do the special accelerated things they claim to be doing. So, just staying informed and taking advantage of those scam stopper messages is a good way to, keep more money in your wallet.
That's right. And so, guys, as we wrap up, could you all just talk about this legislation that's out there? What can y'all elaborate on what it could do, what gaps it might help us close?
On the federal level, there's been a push to restore the financial and criminal penalties for those who are unaccredited representing veterans and charging an unauthorized fee. Unfortunately, it was kind of a glitch in a piece of legislation that was passed in 2006 that kept it illegal for representation as a non-accredited rep, but strip the financial penalties and criminal penalties from it back in 2006, and that's where this has kind of been exploited by some of those companies here. So I think that legislation has had some pretty good bipartisan support, but it's unfortunately been stalled out. It was introduced last congressional session on the 118th. Before that, the 117th. Right now, it seems to kind of just be floating here in the 119th Congress. There has been a little bit of discussion from the federal level that this is a state issue to address at the state legislature level, which we saw. California just passed a piece of legislation that would have those criminal penalties for reps that are unauthorized and unaccredited charging those fees. In Louisiana, they tried passing one and did pass one the other way that would legalize it, but I believe the Middle District of Louisiana judge just ruled that law was unconstitutional and essentially threw it out. There was another, I believe I shared that with you before, Keith. General Ken Paxton out of Texas had another suit against one of these companies for some of those nefarious practices that Josh was mentioning, and got some restitution for those veterans. So there's, besides the federal legislation, there's some state legislation going out there in AGs, and really the big thing is just awareness and advocacy. We have to make people aware, just like Josh said, that there is no guarantee of a certain percentage. There is no guarantee of an outcome, because even looking at the Code of Federal Regulations that VA operates under, you still can have something that says on the front that it's going to be rendered to that individual, but you still have to get it through the VA process on the beginning. So sometimes, unfortunately, it does require going to a judge on the VA side, which is where these companies can't operate because they're not accredited. So a guarantee on the front end for initial claim is, the opposite of that.
Yeah. So what should people do if they get say they're a veteran, they have an injury, could be they're going to get a rating. What do they do if they start getting all these advertisements?
Well, I would say reach out to your office for those complaints. Would be a first step, depending on where they're listening to. Check probably their Attorney General and their State Department of Veteran Affairs might have resources in their state. Right now, VAs, OIG also has resources for veterans that think they're a victim of fraud and people that think they're a victim of some sort of nefarious practice too. So, but I'd start local first, Keith, and reach out to your state Attorney General office, see what they have, and reach out to your State Department of Veteran Affairs. Because usually, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, I usually think those two departments have a pretty good relationship from state to state, just based on, that history. So.
That's right. And Josh, what do you advise people to do if they get some sort of advertisement promising, they're going to get you 100% rating tomorrow afternoon? What do you recommend?
Yeah, I think Michael gave some great pointers about starting state and local. But as an investigator, what I can say really helps us when we look into those companies is if you can, take a screenshot or save that page as a PDF and submit it with your complaint. That helps us a lot. If you spoke to someone at this company, if you can remember who you talked to, if you had their phone number, their email address, things like that, just help us look into it more effectively. And one thing that I'll also say, not just to prop up Michael here, but if you're working with a VSO, you should talk to your VSO, because one thing that has been helpful to us on the investigation side is, some of these companies that might target like an entire retirement community or might send mailers to an entire neighborhood, start getting hits from the same county. So a VSO can come to us and say, hey, 3, 4, 5, 10 of my veterans from this county have all come to me with this same complaint. And that lets us know to focus in on this area, to focus in on this company. So VSOs are really helpful for tracking where these companies are targeted.
Well, I just want to say thank you to you guys. Thanks to John, Michael, Josh. We appreciate you guys very much. We appreciate your service. We appreciate your dedication to veterans and their families. And Michael, I want to say thank you for getting us started right with that Lincoln quote. And in this moment, when the United States is in a military conflict again, I want to remind everybody: don't blame the soldier because of what some politician decided to do. Stand next to the soldier. The soldier might need you as an advocate more now than ever. And so, take us out. Remind us of that Lincoln quote again, Michael. You did it so well in the front end.
Lincoln's quote, in regard to those that served during our nation's Civil War, was, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, his widow and his orphan. They rephrase it to it be inclusive now, but that's the original quote. And I think it still holds true, as we have that duty to care for those that bore in the battle in times of war and times of peace, because those men and women that serve and wear that uniform do a whole heck of a lot, in the non-times of war, that they don't get credit, and they don't make movies about humanitarian aid and the training and the service and natural disaster and world disasters that they show up to and assist, outside. Hopefully that's something they can get back to, and someday we hopefully have an end to that war.
Well, thank you, John, Michael, and Josh, for joining Affording Your Life. Thanks to listeners. Thank you for tuning in, and remember to rate, review, and share this show with your friends and family. Take care, be well, and we'll see you on the next edition of Affording Your Life.